The United States makes the UN work when it wants it to work. And that is exactly the way it should be, because the only question to the United States is what's in our national interest.
My name is John, and the International Criminal Court is now in session. It is June 30th, 2025, and we have arrived to the last day of June. I haven't really made a lot of videos this month, and for that I apologize, but as all of you know by now, I was in Italy for the first 2 weeks of the month, and as all of you know by now, I was jet lagged to hell, and there were other things going on in my life that kinda prevented me from making these videos. And also, before we get started with today's updates, the map that I'm using right now, Syriac, he went on a 2 to 3 day hiatus. Originally, he was supposed to come back like at the end of this week, but it appears that, I don't know, I guess he suddenly felt like, oh, okay, my batteries are recharged, I can map again and post updates. Like nothing happened, and yeah, which is good news for this channel, because Syriac is my main source for making these videos, but also the map itself is very pleasing to look at. Like, it's comfy, it's easy to understand. If you're like an average person, you get it. And during this time, I also experimented with my own map, which was based on this. And I still update it, like as of right now, but it's only exclusive to a few people. And the only way you're going to find this map is in the Syriac Maps Telegram chat, which you can find through Syriac's Twitter/X account. You know, yeah, it basically, you can find it there. So you can check out, like, my take on what is going on, like, on the line of combat contact. But anyway, let's discuss the situation, shall we? First of all, we are going to talk about the Zaporozhye front. A lot of things have been happening here as of late, unexpectedly. The Russians, out of nowhere, have launched an offensive in an attempt, once again, to seize the town of Kamyansky. And after taking some villages in the vicinity of Stepove, they have finally cleared the southern half of Kamyansky. So now the town of Kamyansky, which for a while, like, Ukrainians were on the southern bank of the river, are no longer there. The Russians have completely pushed them out, and Russians are reportedly advancing in the center of the town. Now, if the Russians are able to take the center here, like this area, the battle is pretty much over, and, like, basically everybody here is like a sitting duck, because Russians are just going to easily steamroll it without too much of a problem. But then you have this town here, known as Stepnohersk. This actually has a decent amount of commie blocks here, and here. So it might be a little difficult for the Russians if they were to try to take this town. But when you compare it to Ugledar, I don't know how harder it would be. Like, I don't know. Plavny is definitely cooked if Kamyansky falls. And also, there was an unexpected push, too, in the direction of Orikhiv, or Orikov. The Russians have taken now around a quarter of Mala Takhmachka, and have advanced to this little football/soccer field here. They reportedly control a big chunk of the village, and I'm not really so sure if the Russians can keep up this success here. But if they're able to take the village of Mala Takhmachka, then Orikhiv will literally be right there. Like, it won't even be a problem. Like, they'll be able to enter the town and might be able to take it. Like, this whole area is like its main area of defense. And I think it is on this defensive line, by the way, which is supposed to defend the areas of both Zaporozhye and Dnipropetrovsk regions. But I'm not so sure if the defense can hold, especially now after the recent breakthrough in Kamyansky. But time will tell. Time will tell. There's also a report of the Russians advancing and taking a big chunk of the village of Malinovka, or Malinivka. Deep State has even confirmed that the Russians have taken the central part of the village. But that's about it, basically, in the recent update, because I think the recent news on the line of combat contact is so bad that the government in Ukraine is refusing to let Deep State post exactly everything that is going on. So yeah, Malinovka is, like, basically, half of it is under Russian control, half of it is under Ukrainian control. But based on the current trajectory of things right now, like, in spite of the effort, like, resilient effort by the armed forces of Ukraine and the high losses they're inflicting upon the Russians, I think Malinovka is going to fall to the Russians this summer. In July, that is. Now, moving up to the village of Shevchenko, we have a lot of activity up here. And yes, folks, your eyes are not deceiving you. Shevchenko has fallen to Russia. In fact, the fight itself took like a few days, like the fight for the actual village of Shevchenko. Like, this is a pretty important capture because there was like a giant lithium deposit like outside of the village itself, and also it is another entryway into the Dnipropetrovsk region. And also the fields down south and the road here that connects to Vilne Pole has also been seized by Russia too, so now they have a way to supply Shevchenko. And also the Russians have reportedly advanced outside of Komar too, taking these fields, which also eventually leads to the Dnipropetrovsk region. More precisely, though, the village of Voskresinka. And what do we have here? Oh boy, we got a lot of news to report. First of all, Novoyukreinka has fallen to Russia, apparently without a fight. Ukrainians were not even there, but they kind of used it, I think, as a kill zone for a while. But that came to an end, though, when the Russians seized the villages of Yolta and Zerka. They have now taken everything behind the Mokry River, and also they have crossed the Vovcha River into the Dnipropetrovsk region in the direction of Novopavlivka or Novopavlovka. And just yesterday or so, for the very first time in a few years, the Russians have taken a settlement in the Dnipropetrovsk region. That is Dachny. Like, this is official, folks. The Russians have taken the village of Dachny, and they now have some square kilometers or kilometers within Dnipropetrovsk. I am expecting the village of Filia to not really be contested for too long, so that's probably going to fall easily. And I'm also expecting this pocket of Ukrainians here to be withdrawn from southwestern Donetsk region and into Novopavlivka. So everything here is going to be cleaned out by the Russians in July, and then all these fields outside of Novopavlivka will also fall to Russia too, which in turn will start the battle for the settlement. And with the capture of Zerka and Yolta, the Russians are now in a position, along with these fields here outside of Komar, the Russians are now in a position to finish off the southwestern Donetsk pocket. And as you all know, as I've said a million times, it will eventually lead into the Dnipropetrovsk region. So, with that being said, let's also move further north into the Krasnoyarsk/Pokrovsk direction. So nothing is going on in the village of Moravka, though there are reports of some clashes here, but it's not quite certain if this place is going to fall soon. It might. It's definitely going to fall in July, but not too soon. But we'll see what happens. And in the direction of Udachny, the Russians have restarted their offensive to take Udachny, but they're also started their offensive to take the village of Molodetsky. If they were to seize Molodetsky, then the 20406 road, which eventually goes into Pokrovsk or Krasnoyarsk Amisk, will be completely cut off, and the Russians will have another way to get into Dnepropetrovsk. And the village that would be in grave danger of falling if Molodetsky falls is the village of Novopid Horodine. And also, Udachny, according to the pro-Russian Telegram channel Anatoly Radov, or Moto Patriot, he claimed that the Russians actually have control of not this amount of Udachny. He actually claims they're as far as here. So that would be roughly 50% of Udachny that is under Russian control right now. And if Udachny were to fall, then the Russians will have essentially no issues getting into the Dnepropetrovsk region from this direction, and they would also be able to take the mining area, or like industrial zone, which supposedly is like the main economic backbone for the city of Pokrovsk. So, and also, yeah, if this falls, then the E50 road is pretty much cooked. Like, then the only way to get in and out of Pokrovsk is through the northern road. And speaking of which, let's actually talk about the other side of the Pokrovsk direction, or Krasnoyarsk Amisk front. Again, we got a lot of news coming from here. This is becoming like one of the Russians' strongest fronts in the whole like Russian invasion of Ukraine, if you ask me. To first start off, the Russians have pushed further into the Konstantinovka direction. They have cleared some fields outside of the villages of Katarnivka and Klibambuk, and have also completely seized control, like reported complete control over Alexandro Kalinove. They're also continuing to fight for the village of Yablonivka or Yablonovka, but there are no confirms of any further advances by the Russians at this time. And going a little down southwest, the Russians have achieved a perhaps vital breakthrough towards Pokrovsk and Mayanograd. They have reportedly taken all these fields here, though Syriac has them in the gray zone, and supposedly the Russians have entered the village of Novoikonomichne. Novoikonomichne. If this were to fall along with Mykolaievka, then Mayanograd is wide open and the battle for the city will start. There's also reports that Russians are threatening the villages of Boykivka, Razini, and Fedorivka. Oh, and also Novotoretsky. If these all fall, then the northern flank to the cities of Mayanograd and Pokrovsk will be cut off too. And essentially, both cities will be caught in a full-blown cauldron, because if Udachny falls, along with this industrial zone here, nothing's going to stop the Russians from taking the E50 road, and there will essentially be no way to supply both cities sufficiently. So the Ukrainians will have no choice but to surrender Mayanograd and Pokrovsk in a perhaps humiliating fashion, which obviously Zelensky cannot afford at this time, because he's trying to beg for more aid again in the United States at the recent NATO summit, I think, which took place in Europe, I think, or in DC. I don't know. I'm not really paying too much attention to that. But for all I know, he's trying to get more aid, which, as we all know, the current aid package, which was signed over last spring in 2024, is about to expire. And if Donald Trump does not approve of any more additional aid to Ukraine, they're only going to have more problems on the front than they already do. But I honestly don't know at this point if that aid package is going to help Ukraine win the war or freeze the front. I just don't know if that's going to be the case. The Russians have also reportedly have advanced outside of the village of Kurdu-Mivka. Ukraine fanboys have claimed that Ukrainians have counterattacked and have booted out the Russians from Dalivka, but geolocations and such have said otherwise, so obviously what they're reporting is fake news, so don't believe them. And also, the battle for Turets is nearing its conclusion, and it's probably going to come to an end very soon in July, maybe, or August at the latest. But yeah, Toretsk is pretty much now a done deal. Ukrainians are, for the most part, no longer here. Like 95 or 98% of the city is now under Russian control, and it's only a matter of time before it comes under complete Russian control. There's a report that Stupatsky is not yet completely captured yet by the Russians, and that some parts of it are in a gray zone. But in Chasiv Yar itself, there have been reports of both a counterattack, but also an offensive by the Russians to continue to try to take over the city. The Russians are nearing the deep south, like neighborhoods of Chasiv Yar, and have also advanced in this direction too. So if the Russians are able to seize this neighborhood along with this, the Battle of Chasiv Yar is effectively over, though it appears that Ukrainians are not looking to give up anytime soon because of how important Chasiv Yar is to the defense of Kramatorsk and Konstantinovka. But as far as I know, the Ukrainians are on their last leg in Chasiv Yar, and they probably have at least 1 to 2 months. I mean, I thought the city was going to fall, or no, the town it is. It's not a city, it's a town. I thought it was going to fall as like early as like this month or even May. But it appears that the Ukrainians are refusing to give up, and I expect them to keep fighting until they just simply lose everything. And also a little up north, the Russians have cleared some fields here and also some potential high ground areas. So it's going to be a good way to defend the areas that they took in the Artyomovsk/Bakhmut direction. And yeah. And then moving in the Siversk direction. Now this is quite a surprise. The Russians have broken through here. Some people think it's a nothing burger in that Russians will eventually stall out, but we just got to wait and see what happens. But apparently the Russians have advanced through the fields and are supposedly at the gates of Siversk already. I don't know how this happened, but they are like this far apparently. Like this is where the gray zone is expanding to, and if this were to be true, then it's only a matter of time before reconnaissance and DRG groups enter the town of Siversk. And also there's a report that Siversk's northern flank is in total jeopardy because apparently the village of Siri Bryanka, a big chunk of it, like roughly half of it, is either in a gray zone or under the control of the Russians. And if Siri Bryanka falls to Russia, then Siversk is pretty much cooked. But even if Siversk does fall, I'm not so sure if this is going to be a major factor on the front line for Russia, because if they want to retake, for instance, the city of Liman, they have to cross the Siversky Donets river in order to try to take Liman, but you also have to go through these fields here, or the forested areas. And as you all know by now, that's not really a good idea. But the one pro of Siversk being captured is that all these Ukrainians here in this big forested area within the Lugansk region will be forced to fold back because they will have no way of supplying these forested areas. And also, it will mean Kremina and Rubizhne and Severodonetsk and Lysychansk are completely safe from any like artillery shelling or counterattacks. Now, in the Liman direction itself, there's a report that Ukrainians are on a counterattack in the village of Vidkudub. Apparently, they have like half control of it, but apparently the Russians are holding on to like the part of the village that they do have under their control. And yeah, that's about it. The Russians have also entered the Kharkiv region, or the Kharkov Oblast, from this direction here. And going a little further up north, there was a report that the Russians have taken the village of Novokrylyakivka from the Ukrainians. The MOD, the Russian MOD that is, claimed that this was captured, but there is not enough evidence to prove that yet, and I'm kind of glad that Syriac has this in a gray zone because this one needs a bit of time before it is confirmed. Now, what we do have as confirmed information is that the village of Kalesnikivka is back under Russian control after a Russian counteroffensive to retake it. So now these series of villages here are all back under Russian control completely. And now the only logical thing here to do is to keep advancing from the north of Kupiansk. There's a bit of like dispute right now regarding the fate of the village of Redkovka, but however, it is confirmed that Holubivka is mostly under, if not complete under, Russian control. And then there's a report in the northern Kharkiv direction itself that the Russians have began an offensive to take the industrial zone of Volchansk. And they have crossed the Volcha River and have taken these small forested areas, but it is obvious what the Russians are attempting to do with this assault. If they're able to establish complete control over this industrial zone, which is supposedly on a high ground, then essentially the entirety, like most, if not all of Volchansk is going to easily fall to Russia without a fight. And like none of these commie blocks here, as you see down here in the deep south, are going to be able to save the town of Volchansk from the Russians. It will fall mostly without a fight, and yeah. And there's even reports that the Russians are trying to, I guess, double their efforts, I think, in the Kharkov region, but time will tell if they will do this. Personally, I think the Kharkov region is a secondary front, and it's not really the main priority of the Russians this summer. If anything, it's going to be more focused on Donetsk, Lugansk, and perhaps DNEPROPETROVSK regions. But what's certainly not a priority for the Russians right now is the situation in Sumy region. So apparently the Ukrainians did in fact retake the village of Andriivka in a counterattack, and are also trying to retake the village of Oleksivka, but so far with no success. They are also trying to take these villages outside of Konstantinivka here, but again, so far with no success. And the Russians are still continuing to fight for the village or town of Yanukovka. And if Yanukovka were to fall, then I'm expecting the Russians to try taking these villages here north of the city of Sumy before calling it a day, because obviously taking the city of Sumy without collapsing the entire armed forces of Ukraine is just not something that's feasible. It's just not. I mean, perhaps maybe the Russians can try to go for Myrophilia, but again, I don't know how they can do it. And also, Tetkino for now is safe. The Russians dealt with a major attack by the Ukrainians, and it appeared that, like at first, that Tetkino was going to fall to the Ukrainians. But now it doesn't appear that's going to happen, well, at least for the time being. And yeah, the Ukrainians wasted their manpower and equipment on this area. Shocker. So anyway, folks, that's going to do it for this week's video. I hope all of you enjoyed it, found it informative, and I hope every single one of you also stay safe, has a great day, and yeah, I'll see you all next time, everybody. Next week, that is, on this channel, and goodbye. Peace out.